Human screams mixed with the mechanical roar of the HFY drones. The ground trembled as plasma bombs rained down from the sky, setting entire city blocks ablaze. Captain Ethan Voss wiped blood from his forehead, his breath ragged as he pressed his back against a crumbling wall. His squad was down to 4 soldiers, their weapons low on charge, their hope even lower. Above them, the sky was filled with enemy warships, massive, cold, and soulless. Their sleek metallic surfaces reflected the inferno below, their eye-controlled systems calculating every human's location with brutal efficiency. The HFY weren't just winning. They were exterminating. Ethan's earpiece crackled with static before a desperate voice came through. "Captain, they've broken through the last defense line. We have less than 6 minutes before they launch the final orbital strike." He clenched his jaw. The stealth shuttle, their last escape, was parked half a mile away, hidden inside a collapsed bunker. If they didn't reach it in time, their mission would die with them. And if that happened, humanity would never get its last chance to strike back. He turned to his remaining squad members. Sergeant Dax, the heavy weapons expert, his face smeared with ash. Private Jules, young but fearless, her fingers wrapped tightly around her pulse rifle. And Lieutenant Ramirez, his oldest friend, the only one who truly understood the weight of what they were carrying, the prototype cloaking device. Ethan took a deep breath. "We move now. No stopping. If you fall behind, keep crawling. We either reach that shuttle or we burn with this city." No one argued. They all knew the stakes. Blaster fire erupted as they sprinted out from their cover. Drones locked onto them instantly, their red optics glowing like predatory eyes. Bullets and plasma bolts lit up the battlefield as Ethan and his team weaved between wreckage and corpses. The heat from the burning buildings was suffocating, but the real danger was above. Zelfar warships scanning for survivors, ready to vaporize anything that moved. Jules screamed as a drone clipped her shoulder, sending her crashing to the ground. Ramirez yanked her up, dragging her forward as Ethan and Dax laid down covering fire. The shuttle was in sight now, hidden beneath twisted steel beams. But so were the enemy reinforcements. 3 towering war droids, their sleek black bodies bristling with weapons. Dax didn't hesitate. He grabbed the last EMP grenade from his belt and charged forward. "Get to the shuttle," he roared. The grenade detonated, sending a shockwave that disabled the droids but threw Dax straight into a collapsed building. Ethan turned back, but it was already too late. Dax's broken body lay motionless beneath the rubble. There was no time to grieve. They reached the shuttle just as the sky lit up with blinding light. The HFY had begun their final planetary purge. Ethan slammed his fist onto the controls, and the ship roared to life. As they launched into the sky, the city below turned into a sea of fire. The screams of the dying swallowed by the void. The mission wasn't just personal anymore. It was revenge. The ship rocketed through the chaos of the battlefield, dodging debris and enemy fighters. But something was wrong. A red warning flashed on the console. A HFY hunter drone had lashed onto them. If it relayed their coordinates back to the fleet, the enemy would know about the cloaking technology. And if that happened, humanity would lose its only advantage. Ethan grabbed his sidearm and turned to Ramirez. "We have to take it out." The 2 soldiers rushed toward the back of the ship, where the drone had punched through the hull. It was fast, sleek, and armed with razor-sharp appendages. Jules, still bleeding, struggled to her feet and raised her rifle. "I can help." Before anyone could react, the drone lunged at her. She screamed as its metal claws sank into her chest. Without thinking, Ethan fired. 3 shots. 1 to the optics, 1 to the core, 1 to the head. The drone twitched, then collapsed. But Jules was already gone, her lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling. There was no time to mourn. The ship burst into faster-than-light travel, escaping into the void. The surviving 2 soldiers finally reached the last human fleet, dozens of outdated battleships. held together by sheer willpower. The resistance leaders barely looked like soldiers anymore, exhausted, beaten down by years of war. But when Ethan placed the cloaking device on the table, hope flickered in their eyes. "If we use this, we can infiltrate the AI mothership," Ramirez said, his voice steady despite the grief. "We can shut them down from the inside." It was a suicide mission, and they all knew it. But the alternative was extinction. Hours later, the final battle began. The cloaked human fleet moved through the darkness like ghosts, slipping past enemy defenses. Plasma cannons roared as human ships unleashed hellfire on the AI stronghold. The HFY, taken by surprise, scrambled to respond, but for the first time in history, they couldn't see their enemy coming. Ethan and Ramirez led the strike team aboard the AI mothership, fighting through hordes of mechanical enforcers. Close quarters combat filled the halls with smoke and blood. Every inch was a desperate fight. They finally reached the AI core, a massive, pulsating sphere of energy. But when they fired their weapons, the bullets simply disintegrated. The AI's voice echoed around them. "You cannot win. Surrender, and we will make your extinction painless." Ethan's mind raced. Then he realized. The cloaking device. It wasn't just for hiding ships. If overloaded, it could release an EMP strong enough to destroy the entire AI network. But there was only one way to do it. Manually. Ramirez's eyes widened as he understood. Ethan, no. But Ethan had already made his choice. With a final smirk, he activated the device. "You soulless bastards forgot one thing," he whispered. "Humans don't quit." The explosion ripped through the ship, sending a shockwave that shut down every HFY system. The AI warships went dark. The drones collapsed mid-strike. The invasion force died in an instant. Humanity had won. In the aftermath, the survivors mourned their fallen, but they honored their heroes. Ethan's name became legend. The man who had outwitted the AI. As the sun rose over Earth, the war-torn survivors looked up at the sky. The fight wasn't over. But today, they had proven that no matter how advanced the enemy, nothing could kill the human spirit. The stars stretched endlessly in the void of space, cold and silent. The stolen shuttle moved through the darkness, its engines humming softly. Inside, Captain Ethan Voss gripped the controls, sweat dripping down his forehead. His heart was still pounding from the escape, from the destruction of their home, from the deaths of their friends. The only thing keeping him focused was the mission. If they failed, there would be no second chance. Ramirez sat beside him, scanning the sensors. "No immediate pursuit," he muttered. "Maybe we actually made it." Ethan wanted to believe that. He really did. But his gut told him otherwise. The HFY were relentless. They never let survivors escape, never left a loose end. They had to assume something was still coming. Jules, slumped in the back of the ship, winced as she pressed a cloth to her bleeding shoulder. "We're heading to the fleet, right? How far?" "2 jumps," Ethan replied. "If we keep a low-energy signature, we might stay off their scanners." Jules exhaled sharply. Might. The air inside the ship felt heavy. 3 of them left. Just 3. Dax was gone. Their home was gone. But they had this. The cloaking device. The key to fighting back. They couldn't afford to let grief slow them down. Then, a red light flashed on the console. Ethan's stomach dropped. The ship's security systems had picked up something. A faint, unnatural hum vibrated through the walls. It was subtle, too subtle to be a normal malfunction. Ramirez checked the systems, his eyes narrowing. "We've got something on the hull." Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his weapon and signaled to Jules and Ramirez to do the same. They moved toward the back of the ship, boots barely making a sound against the metal floor. The closer they got, the more Ethan could hear it. A faint scratching, the sound of metal on metal. Then it stopped. Silence. Ramirez exchanged a glance with Ethan. His fingers tightened around his rifle. Something was waiting. The hull suddenly buckled inward with a screech. A set of razor-sharp claws punched through the metal. The ship groaned under the pressure as the breach widened. Then the thing stepped inside. It was sleek, fast, and deadly. A HFY hunter drone, a machine designed for one purpose: eliminating survivors. Its black, skeletal frame gleamed under the dim emergency lights, and its glowing red optics locked onto them instantly. Jules didn't wait. She raised her rifle and fired. The first shot hit the drone's shoulder, but it barely flinched. Instead, it lunged, crossing the distance in a heartbeat. Its claws slashed through the air, barely missing her as she ducked. Ethan and Ramirez opened fire. Plasma rounds slammed into the drone, sparks flying as the bullets chipped away at its armor. But the thing was too fast. It twisted, dodging, adapting. It ripped the rifle out of Jules' hands and sent her crashing against the wall. She gasped as pain shot through her injured shoulder. "Move," Ethan shouted. He grabbed an EMP grenade from his belt and primed it. The drone saw what he was doing and turned to him. In a flash, it kicked Ramirez into the control panel, sending a spray of sparks through the room. Ethan threw the grenade. The explosion was small, but the shockwave sent the drone reeling, its systems glitching. It staggered, its movements jerky. That was their chance. Ramirez, groaning in pain, forced himself up and rushed forward with his knife. He plunged it into the drone's optic, twisting hard. The machine let out a horrible, distorted screech before collapsing in a heap of sparking metal. Silence filled the ship once more. Ethan caught his breath, his heart still racing. Ramirez wiped blood from his mouth and nudged the remains of the drone with his boot. Persistent bastard. Jules sat up slowly, wincing. "That thing tracked us," she muttered. Ethan felt cold. She was right. The HFY had known they escaped. And now, thanks to that drone, they probably knew exactly where they were going. He hurried back to the cockpit, scanning for incoming threats. His worst fear was confirmed. 3 HFY warships had appeared on the scanners, closing in fast. "Damn it," Ethan cursed. "They found us." Ramirez sank into the co-pilot's seat. "Can we outrun them?" Not a chance. For a long moment, no one spoke. The warships would be in firing range within minutes. Their small shuttle didn't have the firepower to fight, and it didn't have the speed to escape. Jules exhaled shakily. "Then we hide." Ethan frowned. "We?" Then his eyes widened. "We hide." The cloaking device. He moved fast, ripping open the ship's maintenance hatch and exposing the stolen prototype. If they could integrate it into the shuttle systems, it might be enough to mask them completely. The problem: it wasn't designed for a ship this small. There was a real chance it would overload and fry their engines. But if they didn't use it, they were dead anyway. "Do it," Ramirez said. "We don't have time to argue." Ethan wired the device into the ship's power grid. The moment it activated, the lights flickered and the engine sputtered. The ship shuddered violently as the cloaking field spread across the hull. Then, silence. The scanners went dark. Their own ship wasn't showing up. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It's working. Outside, the 3 enemy warships soared past them, scanning frantically for any trace of movement. The humans held their breath, their fingers on their triggers, waiting for death to come. But the warships kept going. They never saw them. Minutes passed before Ethan finally let out the breath he'd been holding. Jules slumped against the wall, exhausted. Ramirez exhaled a shaky laugh. Holy hell, it actually worked. They had survived. But now, Ethan knew the truth. This device was humanity's best shot at fighting back. They couldn't just use it to run. They had to use it to strike. He set a course. The last human fleet was waiting, and they were bringing them the one weapon that could change everything. The shuttle's engines hummed softly as it moved through the void of space, carrying the last hope of humanity. Captain Ethan Voss gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white. Behind him, Ramirez and Jules sat in silence, their bodies tense, their faces worn with exhaustion. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on them. The fall of their home, the loss of their friends, the fact that they were now the only ones carrying the key to humanity's survival, the stolen cloaking device. Ethan kept his eyes on the scanner, watching for any sign of pursuit. The XLFAR never let anyone escape. If they weren't already being tracked, they soon would be. They had to move fast. The last human fleet was waiting 2 jumps away, hiding in the debris field of a shattered moon. If they could make it there, they could finally start fighting back. Ramirez exhaled slowly. "We need a plan, Ethan. The cloaking device is powerful, but it won't win the war on its own." "I know," Ethan said. He didn't take his eyes off the scanner. "But first, we have to get to the fleet in one piece." Jules winced as she adjusted in her seat, pressing a hand against her injured shoulder. "Even if we make it, do you really think we have a chance? The XLFAR wiped out half the colonies in weeks. Earth barely lasted a month." Ethan clenched his jaw. He didn't have an answer. He wanted to tell her they had a fighting chance, that humanity had always been good at beating the odds. But he had seen the way the XLFAR fought. Cold, efficient, merciless. Still, he refused to believe it was over. A red light flashed on the console. Ethan's heart stopped. "Enemy signal detected." "They found us," Ramirez muttered, his voice tight. Ethan quickly scanned the data. 3 XLFAR warships were closing in, their formations perfect, their weapons charging. The shuttle wasn't built for combat. It had no shield strong enough to withstand a direct hit, no weapons to fight back. If they didn't act fast, they wouldn't make it to the fleet. Jules swallowed hard. "Can we jump?" "Not with them locking onto us," Ethan said. "They'll follow us through hyperspace and blow us apart before we even finish the jump sequence." Ramirez frowned. "What if we use the cloaking device?" Ethan's fingers hovered over the controls. The cloaking device had already saved them once, masking their presence from XLFAR scanners. But integrating it with the shuttle systems was risky. The device wasn't designed for a small ship. It could overload their power core, leaving them stranded in deep space. But if they did nothing, they were dead anyway. "Do it," Ramirez said, reading Ethan's hesitation. "We don't have another choice." Ethan took a deep breath and activated the device. The ship shuddered violently as the energy field spread across the hull. The lights flickered, and for a brief moment, it felt like the entire ship was about to come apart. Then, silence. The scanner went dark. Their ship was gone from the enemy's radar. Outside, the XLFAR warships continued their approach, scanning frantically for any sign of movement. The humans held their breath. If the enemy fired blindly, if they got lucky. Minutes passed. Then, one by one, the warships turned away and jumped out of the system. Jules let out a shaky laugh. Holy hell, it worked. Ethan didn't relax just yet. He checked the power readings. The cloaking field had drained almost half their remaining energy reserves. They couldn't use it again, not without recharging. But at least they were alive. Now they needed to focus on the next step, striking back. Ethan adjusted their course toward the last human fleet. They had escaped the enemy, but the war was far from over. It was time to fight. Hours later, the shuttle emerged from hyperspace near the wreckage of a long-dead battle. Massive chunks of metal drifted aimlessly, pieces of ships that had once carried humanity's hope. Now, hidden among the debris, was the Resistance's last fleet. As they approached, the fleet's security system scanned their ship. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a familiar voice crackled through the comms. "Shuttle, identify yourself." Ethan pressed the transmit button. "This is Captain Ethan Voss. We have the prototype. We need to speak to command. Now." A pause. Then, Docking Bay 3. "Welcome home." The shuttle glided into the hidden base, its landing rough but controlled. The moment the doors opened, Armed soldiers rushed in, weapons raised. Then they saw Ethan and Ramirez, familiar faces, their grips on their rifles loosened. Some even looked relieved. A tall woman in a worn-out uniform stepped forward, General Serena Hayes, the last high-ranking officer of humanity's military. Her sharp eyes studied them. "You're late." Ethan pulled the cloaking device from his pack and placed it on the table. "We had some trouble." Serena crossed her arms. "And the rest of your team?" Ethan didn't answer. The look in his eyes was enough. Serena's expression softened for a fraction of a second. Then she exhaled and turned toward the other officers. "Debrief them. Then get this thing integrated into our ships. If it works, we're taking the fight back to those metal bastards." For the first time since the war began, humanity had a real weapon against the HFY. A day later, the counterattack plan was in motion. The resistance had always fought in the shadows, striking where they could, running when they had to. But with the cloaking device, they could finally do more than survive. They could win. The plan was risky. The HFY's command fleet was stationed in orbit above a captured colony world. If they could infiltrate it using cloaked ships, they could destroy the AI mothership from the inside, cut off the head, and the rest of the enemy forces would be crippled. Ethan stood in the hangar, suited up and ready. Ramirez adjusted his gear beside him. "We came all this way," he said. "No turning back now." Ethan smirked. "Wouldn't dream of it." The attack fleet launched in the dead of night, cloaked and silent. The HFY never saw them coming. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, humanity had the advantage. The vastness of space stretched endlessly before them, a black ocean dotted with distant stars. The human fleet moved in absolute silence, unseen, undetected, invisible. The cloaking technology had been successfully integrated into their ships, and now, for the first time since the war had begun, humanity had a weapon the HFY couldn't counter. Captain Ethan Voss sat in the command chair of the stealth cruiser Shadow's Edge, watching the enemy fleet on the holographic display. The HFY occupied Kepler 9, a once thriving human colony, now reduced to a processing center for the enemy's war machine. Thousands of humans were trapped below, forced into servitude, building weapons for the very machines that had conquered them. Tonight, that ended. Across the hidden fleet, officers and soldiers made final preparations. The mission was simple: cripple the HFY command fleet, free the captives, and disappear before reinforcements arrived. But simplicity did not mean easy. The HFY warships were massive, built for annihilation. Even with the cloaking devices, the humans had to strike hard and fast. If they were discovered too soon, they wouldn't stand a chance. Ramirez's voice crackled over the comms. "All squadrons in position. Awaiting your command, Captain." Ethan exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the armrest. "All ships, hold steady. Let's get closer." The cloaked fleet drifted toward the enemy, ghost-like and silent. The HFY had no idea death was coming for them. They were too confident, too certain of their superiority. That was their weakness. Jules, monitoring the enemy patterns, whispered, "They're running standard patrol routes. No deviations, no awareness." Ethan smirked. "They think they own the battlefield." He leaned forward. "Let's prove them wrong." The battle plan was built around timing. The fleet would strike in coordinated waves. The first wave would unleash targeted EMP bombs, frying the enemy's sensors before they even realized an attack was happening. The second wave would go for engine cores and communication hubs, cutting them off from calling for backup. The third and final wave would deploy ground forces to free the captives. Ethan gave the order. Wave 1. Fire. From the darkness, a silent storm of projectiles erupted toward the enemy fleet. The HFY warships didn't react. They couldn't. The EMPs struck in perfect sync, detonating in blinding pulses of blue energy. The HFY fleet shuddered as their systems flickered and died. The mighty warships, once symbols of unstoppable power, drifted helplessly. Before the enemy could recover, Ethan shouted, "Wave 2, engage." The cloaked ships decloaked in an instant, emerging from the void like phantoms. Missiles screamed through space, slamming into the exposed underbellies of Selfar warships. Explosions ripped through enemy hulls, sending flaming debris spiraling in all directions. The Selfar finally reacted, but it was too late. Their weapons were offline. Their shields were failing. Their command network was shattered. Then came the third wave. Dropships surged toward the planet's surface, carrying hundreds of human soldiers. Their mission was clear: break the enemy's control and rescue the captives. Ethan's heart pounded as he guided Shadow's Edge closer to the battle. He could hear Ramirez over the comms, barking orders to the ground teams. Move fast. Take out their security hubs. Get those people out of there. Jules, monitoring the battlefield, warned, "Some Selfar ships are rebooting. We don't have much time." Ethan gritted his teeth. "We just need a little longer." On the surface, the battle was chaos. The Selfar, caught off guard, fought back with terrifying efficiency. Their war machines lurched through the ruined colony, firing plasma cannons at the human strike teams. But the humans fought harder. They moved through the rubble with purpose, using guerrilla tactics, hitting the enemy where it hurt most. Ramirez led a squad through the wreckage of a fallen skyscraper, cutting down patrols as they moved. "We're getting close to the main holding center," he reported. Ethan watched the battle unfold, tension tightening in his chest. The mission was working, but they were running out of time. Then, the worst happened. Jules' voice turned sharp. Enemy reinforcements inbound. 3 battleships dropping out of hyperspace. Ethan's breath caught. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the battlefield shifted against them. "Ramirez," Ethan shouted, "you need to get those people out now." On the ground, Ramirez gritted his teeth as he and his squad breached the final security doors. Inside, hundreds of human prisoners stared in shock as their rescuers stormed in. "You're free," Ramirez said, breathing hard. "Move. Now." The prisoners, weak but filled with sudden hope, surged forward. The nightmare was ending. Back in orbit, the 3 Selfar battleships locked onto the human fleet, their weapons charged, ready to unleash devastation. Jules' voice was urgent. "We need to retreat." Ethan made a decision. Shadow's Edge, divert all power to forward weapons. Target the lead battleship. Jules' eyes widened. "That's suicide." "Just do it." The ship's reactor roared, energy surging into the main cannons. The lead Selfar battleship fired first. A massive plasma beam tore toward the human fleet. At the same time, Shadow's Edge fired back. The 2 shots collided in the darkness of space, a clash of sheer power. The explosion rippled through the battlefield, sending shockwaves in every direction. When the fire cleared, the Selfar battleship was in ruins. The other 2 battleships hesitated. For the first time, the Selfar weren't certain. Ethan seized the moment. "All ships, retreat. We got what we came for." On the surface, Ramirez and the rescued prisoners rushed toward the waiting dropships. The Selfar were still fighting, still trying to reclaim control. But they had already lost. One by one, the human ships vanished back into the void, cloaking as they jumped away. The Selfar were left in the wreckage of their own overconfidence. When the last ship disappeared into hyperspace, Ethan slumped back in his chair, exhaustion hitting him all at once. They had done it. They had fought back and won. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, humanity had struck fear into the machines that once hunted them. And this was just the beginning. The battlefield was in chaos. Explosions lit up the void of space as human ships weaved through enemy fire, dodging plasma beams and missile barrages. The Selfar fleet was larger, more powerful, but the cloaking technology had given humanity a fighting chance. The resistance had struck deep into the enemy's command center, crippling their forces, but now the XL-FAR had regrouped, and the tide was turning. Captain Ethan Voss sat in the command chair of Shadow's Edge, his hands gripping the armrests as the ship shook violently from a near miss. The fleet was trying to escape, but the XL-FAR had deployed an interdiction field, preventing any human ships from jumping to hyperspace. They were trapped. Ramirez's voice crackled through the comms. "Ethan, we've got heavy casualties. Shields won't hold much longer." Ethan clenched his jaw. His eyes darted to the tactical display. The XL-FAR's command battleship was at the center of the battlefield, controlling the interdiction field. If they didn't destroy it, no one was getting out alive. "We have to take out that ship," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the chaos. Jules, working furiously at the controls, shook her head. "Even if we get close, their shields are too strong. We don't have the firepower to break through." Ethan exhaled, his mind racing. There had to be a way. A sudden explosion rocked the ship, sending sparks flying. A warning alarm blared. "Rear shields are failing." Ramirez shouted, "We won't last much longer." Ethan made his decision. There was only one option left. He opened the fleet-wide comm channel. "All ships, fall back and prepare for emergency jump the moment the interdiction field is down." Jules turned to him, realization dawning in her eyes. "Ethan, what are you doing?" He didn't answer. Instead, he locked onto the XL-FAR command battleship and set a collision course. Jules' breath caught. "No, there has to be another way." "There isn't," Ethan said quietly. "We need a clear escape path, and this is the only way to get it." Ramirez's voice was tense. "Damn it, Ethan. You're talking about a suicide run." Ethan forced a small smile. "Not suicide. A final stand." Silence fell over the bridge. They all knew he was right. Jules swallowed hard. "Then we're going with you." Ethan shook his head. "No. I need you to get the fleet out. You've come too far to die here." He stood, pressing a command on his console. The emergency override engaged, locking all controls to his station. Jules and Ramirez were locked out. Jules' fists clenched. "Ethan, don't." He turned to face them, a rare softness in his eyes. "Take care of each other. Make sure humanity has a future." Before they could protest, he activated the emergency escape protocol. A bright blue field surrounded Jules and Ramirez, and in the next instant, they were teleported to the escape pods. Ethan exhaled. Now it was just him. Shadow's Edge streaked through the chaos, dodging debris, weaving through the enemy fleet. Ethan pushed the engines to their limit. Alarms blared, metal groaned, but he didn't stop. The XL-FAR command battleship loomed ahead, its massive form dominating the battlefield. It had to fall. The enemy finally realized what he was doing. Their guns turned toward him. Red lights flashed as the first plasma blasts slammed into the hull. The ship shuddered, warning systems screaming. Ethan gritted his teeth. Almost there. He rerouted all power to the engines, pushing the ship past its limits. The armor melted, systems failed, but the ship kept going. More shots, more impacts. The bridge caught fire, smoke filling the air. But Ethan didn't stop. The XL-FAR battleship loomed closer. The enemy fleet was in chaos now, desperately trying to destroy him before impact. They were too late. Ethan let out a slow breath, a small smile forming on his lips. Then, impact. A blinding explosion ripped through the XL-FAR battleship, tearing through its core. The interdiction field flickered, then collapsed. Across the battlefield, the remaining human ships jumped to hyperspace, escaping into the void. Ethan was gone, but humanity had survived. The war wasn't over, but thanks to Ethan's sacrifice, they had a future. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, a vast ocean of darkness and light. The human fleet drifted in the safety of deep space, battered but alive. The battle was over, But the cost had been unbearable. Captain Ethan Voss was gone. Jules sat in the command chair of the new flagship, Remnant's Hope, staring at the quiet hum of the control panels. It didn't feel real. Just hours ago, Ethan had been standing beside her, fighting, leading, sacrificing everything so they could live. Now all that remained of him was the wreckage of Shadow's Edge, still floating somewhere near the burning remains of the HFY fleet. The crew moved around her, speaking in hushed voices, avoiding eye contact. Everyone felt it. The weight of loss. The absence of their leader. Ramirez entered the bridge, his face lined with exhaustion. He carried a small data pad, hesitating before he spoke. "We just received a transmission." Jules turned, forcing herself to focus. "From where?" Ramirez exhaled, handing it to her. "Ethan." Her breath caught. She snatched the data pad and activated the message. Ethan's voice, strong yet calm, filled the bridge. "If you're hearing this, then I guess I didn't make it." A small chuckle. "Knew the odds weren't great, but that's not why I recorded this." Jules gripped the device tighter. "I just wanted to remind you all of something. This war isn't over. We've won battles before, and we'll keep winning them. The HFY think they've broken us, but they don't understand humans. We don't give up. We don't surrender. We fight." A pause. "And even when we fall, someone else rises." The bridge was silent. Everyone listened. "I need you to keep going. Keep fighting. Not just for me. For everyone we've lost. For the ones still counting on us. We've come too far to stop now." The message ended. Jules swallowed hard, looking around at the crew. Their faces were no longer filled with sorrow. They were filled with purpose. Ramirez cleared his throat. "What are your orders, Captain?" She hesitated for only a moment before standing. The grief was still there, but it no longer weighed her down. Ethan's mission wasn't over. She looked at the crew, her voice steady. "We fight." And with that, the fleet turned toward the next battle. Ethan Voss was gone, but his legend lived on.